I feel I'm in a big momentum patch right now, and I feel that is because people are aware of mental health and the fact that food can be such a huge player in it.
This is the Deep in the Weeds podcast. I'm Anthony Huckstep. A career accessing and cooking the very best produce and creating the most incredible dining experiences can often be at odds with the diets and lifestyle of many in the hospitality industry. The long hours, the late nights, the high energy, the need to release stress can all play a role in an unhealthy life. What impact can a change in diet have on those carving out careers in hospitality? Lizzie Fiducia is the owner of MessySpoon. Lizzie, how are you?
Hello, Anthony. I'm very good, thank you. How are you?
I'm good. You set yourself a goal to change the negative impacts of the lifestyle within sort of the food industry with what you do. What triggered that for you? So
I think basically after a career in the commercial kitchen industry and being a chef, and also, you know, what all that brings with the high intensity, as you said, all of those reasons that came about to myself only once I actually left the industry. After being in the commercial kitchens, I became a recipe developer, and it was pretty much instantly, once I had a little bit more time to myself and to sort of look back over my career and realize what was happening with my mental health and my body and my mind, and things related with food was so closely connected to food that was the issue. I didn't realize that I was, eating, whatever it is, polenta chips from the deep fryer bowl left over, or brownies late at night because you haven't eaten for 15 hours because you've been on your feet prepping all day. It's not good. You wouldn't normally go around eating brownies at 1 o'clock in the morning and then have 5 hours sleep and carry on for another 16-hour shift. Like, it's normal to us. And if you're in the industry, that's what becomes normal. But I suddenly realized when I had time to think that was, of course, not normal. And I just found it crazy that I had all this access, and my friends and colleagues had all this access to all this amazing food. We didn't yet have the time or the knowledge or the know-how, I guess, to put that on ourselves and help ourselves with what we had access to and think about the food that we're putting in our body was actually fueling us. I think how many hours or more I could do better if I was eating healthier. I would have been on fire.
Well, I'd love to explore MessySpoon and what you do there shortly, but take us back to when you were young. When did food become of interest to you and you realised that you could make a career from it?
Right. Looking back, it's clearly from a very early age. I was lucky enough to have a dad who was very passionate about growing fruit and veg and teaching us about it. So I can remember going down with my brothers and sisters after school, and we'd learn about what was ready to pick, why it was ready to pick, how we could tell, and how to clean it best and what grew when, and all things like that. Just without even realizing, you're getting this incredible insight with produce. As a child, I think that's a very lucky thing to have. And when you see it being plucked out the ground and, then my mum manages to make something incredible out of it and we're all sitting around a table within an hour of having picked it, I think things like that really stick with you. And I think that planted a seed from the age of 3, I think we must have been doing it. So I think that's where it's all started. And I think it obviously ran in the family because my sisters both had catering companies as well. And I got to help them growing up, and, what wasn't to love about doing all their dirty dishes and hanging out with them as a 12-year-old, earning top money, helping them make beautiful canapes. So I think that's where it all began.
Take us back to when you first started working in commercial kitchens. Do you have any stories of those times when you were learning the ropes?
Yeah, I've probably got hundreds. One sticks to my mind very well, actually. And I think I was probably only a few weeks into my apprenticeship. I was working in a Michelin-starred restaurant in the south of England, and I had it was actually an Australian head chef. She was pretty fierce, but she was very good. And I remember she called me Junior, and she said one early morning shift, Junior, more mushrooms online. And I, just thinking I was so hot on my toes, ran in, got the mushrooms, popped them on her service bench, and of course they were thrown back in my face because they had to be prepared. I couldn't just dump the veggies on her bench, and I think that was. I laugh about it now, but I remember being so petrified and embarrassed at the time, but it didn't deter me. It only made me want it more. So that was a good story, yeah.
Who are the main influences in your career when you were working in the UK?
Main influence, I have to say, is Jamie Oliver. I remember looking at him, and I actually ended up working for him, which at that young age was unimaginable, that I would look at him on TV and then be able to work for him with his teams was something out of a fairy tale for me. And he continued, I think, to be a very big influence. He was just so friendly and approachable and lovable. I just don't know how anyone couldn't adore him. And that came through in his food, and I guess that influence has shaped from then all the way up until MessySpoon, and will hopefully shape the rest of my food life. So I think he's probably the biggest one.
Tell us about your time working with the Jamie Oliver group. What was your role, and what was it like?
I started off as a mere antipasti chef, actually. I didn't have a huge amount of experience, and they picked me up easily because I'd worked for Jamie's in the UK. So I was pretty lucky, and I'd only moved to Australia a few months before. Working for Jamie's, it was super popular at that time. Oh my God, we had queues down the whole of George Street, like nothing you've ever seen before. And the energy and the pace, the produce, everything that we were using and doing was phenomenal. And because of that high pace, I managed to grow up the ranks quite quickly. I also worked pretty damn hard to do it, but it created, I ended up basically being a group training chef, which meant that I got to go around from city to city and, dot around the country, training and opening new restaurants, which was unbelievable experience. A challenge, but unbelievable.
What were some of the challenges of that role?
I would say being a near dwarf, 5'1", blonde woman, trying to teach and train much more experienced male head chefs than me, and telling them how to do things. That was a huge challenge, but probably the biggest and the hardest, and one that I struggled with the most. How can I tell a 45-year-old chef who's got much more experience than me how to do something the Jamie way? And I did struggle with that. But actually, you know what? I think me and those chefs, we ended up having a mutual respect for each other because of what I was doing and what I was teaching them, and how I was having to teach them, and them understanding that I was doing my job to the best of my ability and ended up being pretty good at it. That mutual respect was grew naturally, and it was probably one of the things that changed my life and the remaining of my career once I nailed that, because it didn't stop me. I never felt stopped or held back because of who or what or where I'd come from or, what gender I was. So I think it was really integral, a challenge that was very integral to the pathway that I then went on, and especially with MessySpoon. So, yeah, I wouldn't change it.
And tell us about that period of time. You transitioned away from commercial chefing and have done many things, including recipe development. Tell us about that period of time and that transition and why you moved out from the commercial kitchen.
Right. So I think moving away from commercial kitchens, I had to do. As mentioned in the beginning, I wasn't probably in a very good mental health space. I actually struggled with an eating disorder for a lot of my life, and it sounds so silly to be, struggling with that in a career in food, like a moth to a flame, but it was what helped me and what has helped me get through it. And that combining with the poor state of mental health just because of, that lack of nutrition, the lack of sleep, the lack of exercise, which was being created through my hospitality life, just meant that I needed to move on. I had to be involved in food somehow. There was no way I was ever leaving that side to it. And it just seemed that so luckily, that I was able to be introduced to people at Women's Weekly and Bauer Media, and that got me an in to that side of the industry. And I am forever grateful, that I managed to make that switch to still be involved with food, but not necessarily being in that commercial environment. So that was sort of that merge into recipe development and leaving commercial kitchens.
The mental health of people in the hospitality industry is not an uncommon thing. It's quite prevalent because of the nature of the industry. How did you overcome the issues that you had and confront them?
I think starting MessySpoon was my own personal way of confronting them. I think it wasn't even, we've come such a long way in the industry and in life in general about talking about mental health. For me, for the idea to me to say to one of my colleagues or chef friends, oh yeah, I'm actually struggling with an eating disorder. I mean, they wouldn't have known what to do for a start, and I'm sure they would have been very supportive, but it's not something that it just sounds ridiculous. So basically I had to face it. I knew I had to face it. And I think starting MessySpoon with the goal of nourishing food being the pinnacle and being the end, the beginning and end goal, with nourishing products, nourishing ingredients, thought about, consciously selected, consciously created, was my way of dealing with it and my way of pulling myself out of it. Along with the fact that when you do have your own business, you do have that power to say, okay, yes, tomorrow morning I have to start at 4 a.m. to do packing of deliveries, but tomorrow I will get up at 6 and I'll go for a run. And you have that time and that sort of, you have the power to curate your life a little bit more. And yeah, so MessySpoon was really how I fixed myself, I would say.
What was your first step out of the commercial kitchen?
I actually I went from Jamie's, and then I went from Jamie's, left that because I was able to get my PR, and I was time to move on from that. I'd got enough out of the role, and vice versa, them from me, I think. And my great friend had just got a job being an executive chef to open Acre Eatery in Camperdown, and he asked me to come on board with him. And my God, was that a dream job? It was actually also, in hindsight, the perfect balance between not leaving the industry too fast, but also being able to really hone in on what I love to do, which was to create recipes. Also, it meant that, I think you're from around that area, so you might know Acre, the Camperdown Commons, but you were able to go out and pick the flowers to decorate and pick the herbs. And it was very much back to that dad's veg patch when I was 4 years old. It was sort of bringing me back to that. So I think that was a fantastic, journey to leaving commercial kitchens.
You mentioned you joined Bauer to do recipe development. What's that role like compared to the world of a commercial chef?
That's interesting. You know what? I think I went in there thinking, probably with a bit of the chefy confidence, thinking that because I was a chef, I would be able to create these incredible recipes that they'd never seen before. And, you know, I'd swoop in and be their knight in shining armor. However, let me tell you, it is very hard to create a recipe. I think even more so because I'd been a chef and I was so used to just throwing things together and going with your instinct and your taste buds and, you know, flying by the seat of your pants type thing. Being a recipe developer, yeah, the pace was slower, but my gosh, you know, you really think about the flavors, the taste, the process, everything, the way that I would do something, you know, do a thing that throw potatoes in a pan or something like that. And I would have missed 5 steps without even realizing. And these incredible women who were around me writing these incredible recipes were so patient with me, so patient. And they have taste buds of bloodhounds. I swear to God, they just know everything. They pick out the minorest thing. And yeah, it was an incredible experience. Very, very, very different. But essentially the same goal, and that is to get people cooking food, enjoying food and eating food. So yeah, a different method to a same goal, if that makes sense.
What did you learn from your time there?
I learned a lot about how to make food look yummy. And look delicious, because a lot of it was involved was creating and cooking the food for the photo shoots and for the books and magazines and things. So I did learn a lot of that sort of side to it, but also, as I mentioned, the taste buds thing and actually thinking so hard about what flavors, because I feel like I took it for granted. And when you have an incredible produce in a restaurant and especially for Jamie's, things were quite often written for us. And I think when you're forced to have ingredients that people can access from a home supermarket or a grocery store and create incredible different recipes with those things, with appliances and time that people have at home, which is none, to create a recipe with all of those elements was a massive learning curve and probably one of the hardest things to learn, I think.
Tell us about MessySpoon. What was it like going on that journey to create that at the beginning? What were the challenges heading down that path to create these nutritious and healthy meals?
I think very beginning was getting your hands on affordable, healthy produce for a small business. You know, the actual logistics of saying, okay, I want to make a banana bread that doesn't have refined sugar, so I want to use coconut sugar because that's what's going to go best for my recipe. Being able to afford as a small business the minimum order for amount of coconut sugar, for example, is near impossible, and it would set you bankrupt. So having to buy small batches of that from a supermarket initially, you know, things like that were real. They were small challenge. They were sort of glitches. They weren't, I guess, you know, it was all achievable, but that was an initial challenge that stuck out to me. I was thinking, how am I going to be able to make any money when I can't charge so much for the product just because I can't get my hands on a good value product yet. So I sort of had this period where I was spending probably way too much on produce compared to what I was charging. But, you know, that was only a small bit of time, and that passed. And obviously now I'm able to make the order quantities and stuff like that, so it's not an issue. But also availability of those products. You know, we use buckwheat flour and quite often it might not be available, or we have to use different ones. And just the same as normal wheat flour, it reacts differently in breads and cakes and things like that. So yeah, getting to know the ingredients and things like that was a bit of a challenge, but we've sort of nailed it, I would say, by now.
What was it like for you creating the recipes, given your chefing background and chefs love that fat is flavor and, you know, big flavors, and you were heading down a really nutritious, healthy path? Were there challenges in changing your mindset?
Do you know what? There wasn't any challenges in changing my mindset. I'm a little bit of a stickler for, how do I put it? Sort of, if I don't believe in something, I find it very hard to do. So there was things like in the beginning, the huge focus on all this health. And if it didn't have coconut oil in it, then how could I possibly sell it as a health product? Which to me just sounded ridiculous because, olive oil or extra virgin olive oil was for me, as I knew, and lots of, was going to be the best way to go forward. So to be honest, I kind of stuck with my guns, and we do make our breads with extra virgin olive oil still, and it is the more expensive option, but as you say, fat is flavor. So I've managed to stick with my guns, and it has just taken a little bit of time, I guess, to convince not myself but the customers and potential wholesale customers that is the way forward, and also that I know it's a bit more expensive, but just as you would pay more money in your incredible venue for the premium meat and locally raised grass-fed stuff, then why not put that as effort into sourcing your gluten-free breads, or your, if you're a cafe, your raw vegan snack bars, like that, they should be as thought about, because unfortunately, no matter how much chefs want to deny it, the demand is there for those products. And I think it's going to be a really interesting time to see that hopefully I can be one of those people, and MessySpoon can help people realize that it is worth putting that extra money in to those products. But we'll see. Time will tell. I got a lot of work to do.
How did you choose what you were going to produce for the MessySpoon range?
It was pretty natural, because it was a natural process, and actually COVID has sort of ensured that I've been kept on my toes and had to make a few changes. And we're only young, so we only had about a year before COVID. And I chose what I wanted to eat. And now I'm a 100% sweet or 100% savory. I love both of them. And with the savory side, I had to start with bread, because it's the base of everything. It was just the base of everything for me, and for so many. And so that is how the Good Gut Loaf came about, which is our signature product. And for me, it was never about saying, I never sat down and said, right, we need a gluten-free product, and we need a vegan product, and we need a this product, and we need a that. It was, what do I want to create? What do I want to eat? What do I know is genuinely nutrient dense and going to benefit my customers and me, because I wasn't going to sell anything that I wasn't, wanting to eat every day. And that the bread came completely naturally from that. I couldn't tell you. It's sort of like adding how much salt you add. You don't know, you just add it. But then moving on from that, the products it did sort of go, I was small enough. And when I was talking to restaurants and cafes, quite often they would say to me, oh, we really want this. And I'd say, oh, cool, let's make it. Let's make it for you. Let's make it together and create it. And actually with one of my biggest customers now, they've got 9 venues, and I do a lot of work in creating the products with them that then I have in my range and can sell on and create and develop. So I'm very lucky. It hasn't been too structured, as it were. But, MessySpoon, it's not really about structure, is it?
How long did it take to gain momentum with MessySpoon, and what were a couple of the early wins in the business?
I would say the momentum is, I'm still in it, the momentum. I would say that COVID I can't tell whether COVID has helped or not helped, because we're such a young business. I wouldn't know any other way. I haven't got much to compare it to, but I feel I'm in a big momentum patch right now. And I feel that is because people are aware of mental health and the fact that food can be such a huge player in it. but also that, your share of voice, as that increases, I think obviously the momentum builds. And a huge win for me was I had a baby, and I had a few surgeries post his birth, and I was walking out the hospital with him in tow and my husband, and we walked into one of my favourite venues, which was a Cali Press, and I just wanted to feel good and happy and healthy after eating hospital food for 3 days. And I just ended up chatting to the executive chef. And can you believe that after I was so furious, I'd been days off work and I couldn't cope. I was so angry. I'd been away from the kitchen and all this. And then as a result of this hospital visit came one of my biggest clients. And yeah, I thought that was pretty phenomenal, pretty good going.
You mentioned that MessySpoon and the creation of it, and the focus on that healthy sort of nutritious diet was helped you with mental health issues and an eating disorder. What sort of impact has MessySpoon and its success so far had on you?
I would say it has helped me grow personally hugely. It's made me more patient. It's made me more confident, and it's changed my perception, I guess, of what I thought my career would end up being. I think MessySpoon is part of me now. It always has been, but I think it will be for a very long time. But yeah, I think one of the big things is it's given me confidence, and it's given me a platform to ensure that my beliefs and my real passion to do with health food and nutrient dense food has somewhere to be, and it has somewhere to grow from and to shout from, and to try and learn more and more and more about. So it's really created that platform for me personally, and hopefully for customers and clients in the future.
For people working in the food service sector, what advice would you have for them to look after themselves?
I would say that yes, you went to bed at 2 a.m. and you feel exhausted, but get up and go for a run, for a walk, for a swim, fresh air, outdoors. I'd say that's one of the most incredible, important things, locking yourself up in bed because, of course, you're exhausted and tired is one of the main things. As soon as you go on a walk or get some fresh air, you're going to realise you've got actually a bit of an appetite because you haven't eaten properly for a few days, and fill that with food that you're conscious about. So, I can't tell chefs what to do, what to eat, or things like that, obviously. But just think for a second, is that actually going to be what's good for my body, my brain right now? I can eat my food at work, but when you're not at work, just maybe have that slight second before you're doing it and before you're realizing what you're eating. And don't be too hard on health food because it's not all bad.
What's next for MessySpoon and its journey?
We've got a few things on the horizon. We have got retail. So we currently got a few products which are ready to go into retail. Then things will be popping up in grocery stores and things like that around Sydney in the near future. And we've also got our little shop. So the production kitchen, we've got a new kind of laneway kitchen, very trendy in Surrey Hills. I'm not quite cool enough to be in Surrey Hills yet, but we'll get there. And that we're going to have a shop there. So a section of the production kitchen is going to be cornered off, and we're going to have all of our fresh breads and things like that available for people to grab and go, and sort of almost like a little corner grocery store. So it's incredibly excited about that. But we've sort of had to wait and being held back a little bit because of COVID. We're not quite sure when it's going to reopen and when we're going to be able to get people down there. But yeah, so those are the two main things that we've got coming up.
Well, Lizzie, we've loved hearing your story today on Deep in the Weeds. Good luck with everything. and congratulations. Please keep in touch and we'll talk again soon.
Will do. Thank you so much for having me. Thank you, Anthony.
This is the Deep in the Weeds podcast. I'm Anthony Huckstep. Stay tuned as we take a deep dive into the lives of the incredible people who ply their trade in the food and hospitality sector. Special thanks to executive producer Rob Locke for making this all happen. Follow us on Instagram at Deep in the Weeds Podcast or email us at podcast@deepintheweeds.com.au. Stay safe and be well.